I, 28F, was sitting in a sea of pastel pink and blue. The room was filled with soft chatter and the crinkle of wrapping paper. My best friend, Sarah, had gone all out for my baby shower. Little rubber ducks floated in the punch bowl. Tiny baby sock decorations hung from the chandelier. It was supposed to be the happiest day, a celebration of the new life my husband Mark and I were about to bring into the world. I smiled at my aunt as she handed me another beautifully wrapped gift. Inside was a tiny knitted sweater. It was perfect. I felt a warmth spread through my chest, a feeling of love and support from all these wonderful women. Then my mother-in-law, Carol, cleared her throat. The sound was sharp, cutting through the gentle hum of the party. Everyone turned to look at her. She had a tight, unpleasant smile on her face, the kind she always wore when she was about to say something she knew would cause trouble. Mark and I had been married for 3 years, and in that time, I had learned to dread that smile. It was a warning sign, a storm cloud on the horizon. I braced myself. She held up her glass, pretending to make a toast. "It is so wonderful to see everyone here," she began, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Celebrating Anna and the new baby." She paused, letting her eyes sweep across the room before they landed directly on me. Her smile widened, but it didn't reach her eyes. They were cold, like little chips of ice. "I just have one little question for the glowing mother-to-be." A nervous silence fell over the room. My own smile felt frozen on my face. I could feel Sarah shift uncomfortably beside me. I knew, with a sinking certainty, that this was not going to be a friendly question. Carol lived for moments like this. She loved being the center of attention, especially if it meant putting me in a difficult position. She saw my life with her son as a competition, and she was determined to win, even if she had to invent the rules. She took a slow, deliberate sip from her glass, drawing out the moment. The silence stretched, becoming thick and heavy. I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. I just wanted her to get it over with, say whatever cruel thing she had planned and let the moment pass. But she was enjoying the power she held over the room. She was savoring my discomfort. Finally, About called me a liar and a cheater. She had questioned the very foundation of my marriage and the legitimacy of my unborn child. All the little hurts and slights from the past 3 years coalesced into a single, sharp point of pain in my chest. Every backhanded compliment, every dismissive wave of her hand, every time she had praised Mark's ex-girlfriend in front of me. It had all been leading to this public execution of my character. My hands started to tremble. I felt dozens of pairs of eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. They were expecting tears. They were expecting a hysterical defense. They were expecting me to break down. But something else happened inside me. The initial shock and the deep, searing pain were suddenly replaced by a cold, clear calm. It was like a switch had been flipped. The part of me that had always tried to keep the peace, to smooth things over, to win her approval, simply vanished. It died right there in that chair, surrounded by pink and blue balloons. In its place was a quiet, unshakable resolve. I looked at Carol. I didn't try to hide the disgust on my face. I let her see exactly what I thought of her. The little smile on her lips faltered for a second. She hadn't expected this. She had expected a victim. I took a slow breath, letting the silence hang for just a moment longer. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to feel the weight of what she had done. Then, I gave her an answer. My voice was quiet, but it carried in the silent room. "No," I said, just that one word. I didn't elaborate. I didn't explain. I just said, "No." I watched as confusion flickered across her face. This was not the reaction she had prepared for. I stood up slowly, my hand resting on my swollen belly. I picked up my purse from the floor. I didn't look at anyone else. My focus was entirely on the woman who had tried to ruin my life in a single sentence. I gave her a small, tight smile of my own, and then I turned around and walked out of the room. I could hear the eruption of whispers behind me as I walked down the hall and out the front door. I didn't run. I walked with a steady, determined pace. The cool afternoon air hit my face, and it felt like complained about his mother. He had always defended her. "That's just how she is," he would say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." Or his favorite, "Just try to get along with her, for me." I had tried. I had bent over backwards trying to please that woman. I had swallowed her insults and ignored her passive-aggressive comments. I had done it for him, for our marriage. And for what? So she could stand up in a room full of our loved ones and imply I was carrying another man's child? My phone started ringing. I glanced at the screen. It was Mark. I pressed the button to send his call to voicemail. It rang again immediately. I did the same thing. A text message popped up. "Anna, where are you? Call me." Another one followed. "Mom was just joking. You're overreacting. Overreacting." The words sent a jolt of fury through me. He thought I was overreacting. He was already taking her side. He was already making excuses for her. That single text message confirmed everything I needed to know. He would never choose me. He would never stand up for me. His loyalty would always be to his mother, no matter how terribly she treated me. A sob escaped my lips. A raw, painful sound. It wasn't a sob of weakness. It was a sob of grief. I was mourning the death of my marriage, because in that moment, I knew it was dead. I couldn't go back to him. I couldn't raise my child in a house where he would be exposed to that kind of poison, where his own father wouldn't protect his mother from such vile attacks. I didn't know what to do. My first instinct was to go to my parents' house, but they lived 2 hours away. I needed someone closer. I needed my best friend. I navigated to Sarah's address, my vision blurring with tears. She would know what to do. She had been there. She had seen it all happen. She would understand. When I pulled up to her apartment, she was already standing outside, her phone pressed to her ear. She must have left the party right after I did. The moment she saw my car, she hung up and ran over. She opened the passenger door and slid in, her face a mask of concern and fury. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice soft. I shook my head, unable to speak. The tears were coming. "I going to do, Sarah?" I whispered, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. "First," she said, her voice firm, "you're going to come inside. You're going to have a glass of water and sit down for a minute. We're going to turn off your phone, and we're going to figure this out. Together." Her certainty was a lifeline. I nodded, taking a deep, shuddering breath. She was right. I needed a plan. I couldn't let Carol win. I couldn't let her destroy my life and get away with it. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about my baby. I had to protect my child from that family. And if that meant fighting back, then that's what I would do. The tears stopped. The cold resolve returned, stronger than before. This was not the end. This was the beginning of a war, and I was going to win it. Inside Sarah's apartment, I sat on her comfortable couch while she made me a cup of chamomile tea. My phone was on her kitchen counter, buzzing incessantly. Mark was calling over and over again. Then texts from his sister Lisa, then his father David. I ignored them all. I felt strangely disconnected from them, as if they were people from a past life. "Here," Sarah said, handing me the warm mug. "Drink this. It will help you calm down." I took a sip, the warmth spreading through my chest. "I am calm," I said, and I was surprised to find that it was true. The hysterical grief had passed. Now, I just felt a deep, chilling sense of purpose. "I'm not going back, Sarah." She sat down next to me. "I don't think you should," she said quietly. "What she did was unforgivable. And what Mark did, or rather what he didn't do, is just as bad." "He told me I was overreacting," I repeated, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. "He sent me a text. He couldn't even say it to my face, because he's a coward," Sarah said, her voice laced with contempt. "He's terrified of his mother. He always has been." I thought back over our relationship. I had always seen his devotion to his mother as a sweet, if sometimes annoying, trait. He was a good son, but now I saw it for what it was. A weakness, a fatal flaw. He was so desperate for her approval that he was willing to sacrifice his own wife's dignity to get it. She support system, hoping I would be too ashamed to face anyone. Well, her plan backfired, Sarah said fiercely. She didn't isolate you. She just showed everyone exactly who she is. No one in that room today is on her side. You should have seen their faces after you left. They were horrified. What happened after I left? I asked, morbidly curious. Chaos, Sarah said with a grim smile. Your aunt went over and told Carol she was a disgrace. A few other women started yelling at her. Mark just stood there looking helpless. His father eventually grabbed Carol by the arm and dragged her out of there. The party was over about 5 minutes after you walked out. A small, bitter part of me was pleased to hear that. I was glad she hadn't gotten away with it completely. I was glad people had stood up for me. But it didn't change the fundamental problem. The damage was done. A question like that, once asked, can never be fully taken back. It would linger in the air forever. My phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my own mother. Sweetheart, are you okay? Sarah told me what happened. Please call me when you can. I love you. I felt a fresh wave of tears prick my eyes. I called her immediately. Anna? Oh, thank God, she said, her voice filled with relief. I was so worried. Are you with Sarah? Yes, Mom. I'm okay, I said, my voice thick with emotion. No, you are not okay, she corrected me gently. What that woman did to you is monstrous. I am so sorry, honey. I'm getting in the car right now. I'll be there in 2 hours. You don't have to do that, I protested weakly. Yes, I do, she said, her tone leaving no room for argument. You need your mother. Now you just sit tight. We'll figure this all out. After I hung up, I felt a little stronger. I had Sarah. I had my mom. I wasn't alone. I could do this. So, what's the next step? Sarah asked, switching into practical mode. I need to talk to Mark, I said. But not yet. I need to be ready. I need to know exactly what I want to say. What do you want? She asked. It was a simple question, but the answer was complicated. What did I want? I wanted my old life back. There were no easy answers. My phone started ringing again. It was Mark. This time I took a deep breath and answered it. Anna? Finally, where are you? Are you okay? He asked, his voice a jumble of panic and frustration. I'm fine, I said, my voice cold and distant. Why did you leave like that? You caused such a scene, he said, and just like that he was blaming me. I caused a scene, I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. Your mother stood up in front of all our friends and family and accused me of being unfaithful, and you think I caused a scene? She wasn't accusing you, he insisted, his voice rising. It was a joke. A stupid, tasteless joke, I admit, but a joke nonetheless. You know how she is. Oh, I know how she is, I said, my voice dripping with ice. I know she's a cruel, manipulative bully. The question is, why don't you? Or do you just not care? That's not fair, Anna, he whined. I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. You could have said, Mom, that's an inappropriate question. You could have said, of course it's my baby, don't be ridiculous. You could have said anything, but you said nothing. You just stood there and let her humiliate me. I'm sorry, he said, but it sounded hollow. Okay? I'm sorry. Now can you please just come home so we can talk about this? No, I said flatly. I'm not coming home. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. What do you mean you're not coming home? He asked, his voice laced with disbelief. I mean, I am not setting foot in that house again until I receive a sincere, public apology from your mother, I stated, my voice unwavering. He scoffed. You can't be serious. You know she'll never do that. Yes, I do, I said. And that's the point. This is your choice, Mark. You can have a wife and a child, or you can have your mother. But you can't have both. Not anymore. I hung up the phone before he could reply. My hand was shaking, but I felt a surge of empowerment. I had drawn a line in the sand. For the first time in our relationship, I had stood up for myself. I had given him an ultimatum. Hard to hear, she said, her voice gentle but firm. But this is not just about Carol. This is about Mark. A good man, a good husband, would never have allowed this to go on for so long. He should have put a stop to it years ago. I know, I whispered. the truth of her words settling heavily in my heart. I kept making excuses for him. I thought he would eventually see it. I thought he would stand up for me. Some men are just not built that way, my mom said sadly. They are raised to please their mothers above all else. It's a difficult pattern to break. So what do I do? I asked, feeling overwhelmed. I gave him an ultimatum. I told him I wouldn't come back without a public apology from her. That was a good first step, my mom said approvingly. You set a boundary. A very clear one. Now you have to stick to it. But what if he doesn't choose me? I asked, the fear I had been suppressing bubbling to the surface. What if he lets me go just to keep his mom happy? Then he's not the man you thought he was, my mom said simply. And you and your baby are better off without him. It will hurt, but you will survive. You are stronger than you think. Sarah nodded in agreement. She's right, Anna. You can stay here as long as you need. We'll get you a lawyer. We'll figure out the logistics. You are not alone in this. Their support was a balm on my wounded soul, but the thought of my marriage ending, of raising my baby alone, was terrifying. I loved Mark, or at least, I loved the man I thought he was, the man who had been so kind and funny and loving before his mother's influence had slowly poisoned everything. Over the next few days, I stayed at Sarah's, my phone mostly on silent. Mark continued to text and call, his messages oscillating between angry demands that I come home and pathetic pleas for forgiveness. He never once mentioned my condition, the apology from his mother. It was as if he was trying to pretend I had never said it, hoping that if he ignored it, the problem would go away. His sister Lisa also reached out. Her texts were more sympathetic. "I'm so sorry about what Mom said," she wrote. "It was awful. I hope you're okay." I understand Carol's motivation. This wasn't just a random act of cruelty. It felt calculated, premeditated. I started thinking back, searching for clues. Had she said anything before that might have hinted at this? My mind snagged on a strange conversation we'd had a few months ago, shortly after we announced the pregnancy. We were at their house for Sunday dinner. Mark was in the other room with his dad, watching football. I was helping Carol clear the table. "You must be so excited to be a grandmother," I had said, trying to make conversation. She had given me that tight, unpleasant smile. "Of course," she'd said. "I just hope Mark knows what he's getting into. He can be so naive sometimes, so trusting." At the time, I had dismissed it as a typical backhanded comment. But now, it seemed more sinister. What did she mean by that? That he was naive to trust me? Then I remembered something else. A few weeks later, she had called Mark while I was in the room. I could only hear his side of the conversation, but he seemed agitated. "Mom, stop it," he had said, his voice low and tense. "We've talked about this. I trust her." He had hung up and refused to tell me what the call was about, just saying his mom was being her usual self. He had known. He had known she harbored these suspicions. He had known she was questioning the paternity of our child in private, and he had never told me. He had let me walk into that baby shower completely unprepared. The betrayal was deeper than I had even realized. He wasn't just a passive bystander, he was an active participant in the cover-up of his mother's malice. The anger returned, sharp and hot. I needed to talk to him. I needed to confront him with this new information. I waited until I knew he would be home from work, then I called him. He answered on the first ring. "Anna! Are you coming home?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "We need to talk about your mother's joke." He sighed, a long, weary sound. "Can we not do this again?" I said I was sorry. "You're sorry you were shocked into silence," I corrected him. "But you weren't shocked by the sentiment, were you, Mark? You weren't surprised by what she said, because she had been saying it to you for weeks." There was a dead silence. "Let her walk all over me, just like you always do." "What do you want from me, Anna?" he asked, his voice filled with exasperation. "I want you to be a husband," I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my anger. "I want you to be a partner. I want you to protect your family, and your family is me and this baby, not her." She's my mother, he shouted. And I'm your wife, I shouted back. The mother of your child, who she seems to think isn't yours. Doesn't that bother you at all? Doesn't it enrage you that she would even think that, let alone say it? Of course it does, he said, his voice softening slightly. But she's just worried. She's been through a lot. Been through a lot? What has she been through that gives her the right to destroy my reputation? He hesitated. It's complicated. It's about history. She's just scared of history repeating itself. The phrase caught my attention. History repeating itself. It was a strange thing to say. What history? I asked, my voice sharp. What are you talking about? It's nothing, he said quickly. Too quickly. It's old family stuff, it doesn't matter. It clearly matters to her, I insisted, my reporter's instincts kicking in. I felt like I was on the verge of a breakthrough, a key piece of the puzzle. If you want me to even consider coming back, you will tell me what you mean by history repeating itself. He was quiet for a long time. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. I knew he was debating with himself, weighing his loyalty to his mother against his desire to fix our marriage. Mark, I said, my voice softer now. Please. I need to understand. He sighed again, a sound of defeat. Okay, he said, but you can't tell her I told you. I won't, I promised, holding my breath. Years ago, he began, his voice low. Before I met you, I was with someone else. We were young, stupid. There was a pregnancy scare. It got messy. She claimed the baby was mine. My stomach clenched. I had known he had a serious ex, but he had never mentioned this. What happened? Her attack on me had felt so personal. There had to be something more. There's more, isn't there? I pressed. Something you're not telling me. No, he said, but his denial was weak. That's it. That's the big secret. I didn't believe him, but I knew I wouldn't get anything else out of him right now. He had given me enough for one day. I have to go, I said. I need to think. Will you come home? He asked, his voice hopeful. I don't know, I said honestly. The ultimatum still stands, Mark. A public apology. Nothing has changed. I hung up, my mind reeling. So Carol's paranoia was rooted in Mark's past. It was a twisted, ugly story, but it shed some light on her motivations. She saw me as another potential gold digger, another woman trying to trap her precious son. It was insulting, but at least it was a reason. But as I sat there, replaying the conversation in my head, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was a missing piece. His words, history repeating itself, echoed in my mind. It felt bigger than just a story about an ex-girlfriend. It felt older, deeper, and I was determined to find out what it was. My anger was now mixed with a burning curiosity. I was no longer just a victim. I was an investigator, and I would not rest until I had uncovered the entire truth. Because I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that my entire future depended on it. The next day, I woke up with a new sense of clarity. Pushing Mark for more information would be useless. He was too deep in the fog of his mother's influence. If I wanted the real story, I needed to talk to someone else. Someone who was on the inside, but maybe not as brainwashed. My thoughts immediately went to David, my father-in-law. David was a quiet man. He was completely overshadowed by his loud, domineering wife. In all the years I'd known him, I had rarely seen him stand up to Carol. He usually just retreated into his newspaper or his workshop in the garage whenever she started one of her tirades. But I had always sensed a kindness in him, a sort of weary resignation. He had always been perfectly pleasant to me, even if he never went out of his way. And I think David knows what it means. Sarah was more supportive. Go for it, she said. What have you got to lose? Just be careful. The next morning, I got up early and drove to the coffee shop on the other side of town. I found a booth in the back corner, ordered a decaf coffee, and waited. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach. What if he didn't show up? What if he refused to talk to me? At 7 o'clock, right on schedule, the little bell on the door chimed and David walked in. He looked tired, older than I had ever seen him. He ordered his usual black coffee and a muffin and then looked around for a place to sit. His eyes scanned the room and then landed on me. For a moment, he looked startled, like he was about to turn and walk out, but then he seemed to make a decision. He gave me a small, sad nod and walked over to my booth. "Anna," he said, his voice quiet, "what are you doing here?" "I was hoping I could talk to you," I said, my heart pounding. He hesitated, glancing towards the door as if he expected Carol to burst in at any moment. "I don't know if that's a good idea," he said. "Please, David," I pleaded, "just for a few minutes. I need to understand something." He seemed to wrestle with himself for a moment, then he sighed and slid into the seat opposite me. "Okay," he said. "A few minutes." I took a deep breath. "Mark told me about what happened with his ex-girlfriend," I began. "He said that's why Carol is so paranoid." David took a long sip of his coffee. He didn't say anything, but his silence was confirmation enough. "He also said that she's afraid of history repeating itself," I continued, watching his face carefully. "But it feels like it's more than just that story. It feels like there's something else. Something older." David stared down at his muffin, tracing the pattern on the paper liner with his finger. He looked like a man carrying a heavy weight. "David," I said gently, "what history is she so afraid of?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "Carol, she wasn't always like this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "She was different when we were young, happier, lighter. But something happened that changed her." He paused, and I held my breath, not wanting to break the spell. "When Mark had once done the exact same thing to her own husband." "What?" I breathed, my mind struggling to process the information. "It was crazy," David said, shaking his head at the memory. "I never gave her any reason to doubt me, but she was convinced. She made my life a living hell for almost a year, questioning me, accusing me. It nearly destroyed us. It caused a huge rift with my parents. They never forgave her for it. Not really." "What happened?" I asked. "How did you get past it?" "Eventually, she just seemed to get over it," he said with a shrug. "Or she buried it. We never really talked about it again. But it was always there, under the surface. It's the secret she's been carrying all these years. It's the source of all her anger, all her control. She's so terrified of being seen as the crazy one, the bad mother, that she projects it all onto everyone else, especially you." Suddenly, everything clicked into place. All of her cruelty, her paranoia, her obsession with control. It wasn't about me. It wasn't even really about Mark's ex-girlfriend. It was about her. It was a deep-seated 30-year-old insecurity that she had been nursing. She was projecting her own greatest shame onto me. By accusing me of infidelity, she was trying to make me into the monster that she secretly feared she was. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. The woman who had built her entire identity around being the perfect, unimpeachable matriarch was a fraud. Her perfect family was built on a foundation of lies and paranoia. "She's afraid of history repeating itself," I said, the words finally making sense. "Her own history." David nodded grimly. "She sees her own past in you, and she's trying to destroy you before you can destroy her." I felt a strange mix of emotions. Pity, for the woman she must have been before this darkness consumed her. But mostly, I felt a cold, hard fury. She was willing to ruin my life, my marriage, my child's happiness, all to protect her own fragile ego and her 30-year-old secret. "Does Mark know?" I asked. David shook his head. "No. We never told him. We wanted to protect him from it. Protect him." The same words Mark used. This family's obsession with protect handed the perfect weapon. Her own history. I spent the rest of the day planning. I knew I couldn't just throw the accusation at her. She would deny it, and it would be my word against David's. And I knew David, when push came to shove, would likely retreat back into his shell to avoid his wife's wrath. I needed to be smarter. I needed to set a trap. I called Mark that evening. My tone was different this time. Softer, more conciliatory. Mark, I said, I've been doing a lot of thinking. And I think you're right. Maybe I did overreact. I could almost hear the relief in his voice. Really? Oh, Anna, that's great. I knew you'd see reason. I want to fix this, I continued, hating the words even as I said them. I want our family back together. I'm willing to come home and talk. That's all I want, he said, practically beaming through the phone. When can you come? I'll come pick you up right now. Not so fast, I said. I still think we need to clear the air. With your mother. I think we should all sit down together. You, me, your mom, your dad, even Lisa if she's around. A family meeting. So we can all talk this out calmly and move on. A family meeting? He asked, sounding hesitant. I don't know, Anna. That could get ugly. It won't, I promised, my voice smooth as silk. I won't get angry. I just want to understand her side of things. I want to hear her out. And I want her to hear me out. It's the only way we can move forward. For the baby. Using the baby was a low blow, but I knew it was his weak spot. He sighed. Okay, he agreed. You're right. It's for the baby. I'll arrange it for tomorrow night. Perfect, I said, a cold smile touching my lips. I'll see you then. I hung up the phone, my heart racing. The stage was set. Carol would walk into that meeting feeling smug and victorious, thinking I was coming back with my tail between my legs, ready to apologize. She would be completely unprepared for what was coming. She thought she was the master manipulator, the one who pulled all the strings. But she had underestimated me. She had pushed me too far. And tomorrow night, I was going to show her what it the window, staring out into the garden, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else in the world. Anna, Mark said, standing up. I'm so glad you came. He tried to hug me, but I sidestepped him and took a seat in the armchair opposite Carol. I wanted a clear line of sight. Thank you all for agreeing to meet, I said, my voice calm and even. I looked directly at Carol. Carol, I wanted to give you a chance to explain yourself. Carol sniffed, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. Well, I'm glad to see you've come to your senses, Anna, she began, her tone condescending. Running away like that was very childish. You caused a great deal of embarrassment for this family. I was the one who was embarrassed, Carol, I said, my voice still quiet. I refused to let her get a rise out of me. You stood up in a room full of people and publicly questioned my fidelity and the paternity of my child, your grandchild. Oh, for heaven's sake, she said, waving a dismissive hand. It was a simple question. A joke. You're being far too sensitive. If you have nothing to hide, why get so upset? This was it. The opening I had been waiting for. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locked on hers. You're right, I said. I have nothing to hide. But I've come to understand that you're the one who is sensitive about these things. It's understandable, I suppose, especially with the fear of history repeating itself. I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. Mark shifted uncomfortably on the couch. Lisa looked confused. David continued to stare out the window, but I saw his shoulders tense. I have no idea what you're talking about, Carol said, her voice a little too sharp. She was trying to bluff her way through. Don't you? I asked, my voice soft and dangerous. I'm talking about Mark's ex-girlfriend, the one you paid off. You were so convinced she was trying to trap your son. You must have been terrified when you found out I was pregnant. You must have thought, here we go again. Carol's face was pale. She looked at Mark, a silent accusation in her eyes. You told her? She hissed. Mark looked down at his hands, unable to meet her gaze. She deserved to know why you were acting that way, he mumbled. Color drained from her face again. David, from his post by the window, finally turned to look at me, his eyes wide with alarm. What is she talking about, Mom? Lisa asked, looking back and forth between us. She's talking nonsense, Carol snapped, her voice high and strained. She's hysterical. The pregnancy has made her unstable. I ignored her and turned my attention to my father-in-law. David, I said, my voice gentle but firm. Do you think history is repeating itself? Like when you had to deal with questions about Mark's paternity? The room fell into a dead silence. Every eye was on David. He looked trapped. He looked at his wife, whose face was a mask of pure terror. He looked at his son, whose face was filled with confusion. He looked at me, and in my eyes he saw that I already knew. The secret was out. There was no putting it back in the box. "Dad?" Mark said, his voice hesitant. "What is Anna talking about?" David took a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at his wife, and for the first time I saw something other than fear in his eyes. I saw a flicker of anger, a flicker of resentment for the 30 years he had carried this secret for her. He looked at his son. "Your mother," he began, his voice raspy with emotion, "had a difficult time after you were born. She got it in her head that I wasn't your father." Mark stared at him, his mouth hanging open. "What?" "She's lying!" Carol shrieked, jumping to her feet. "He's lying! You're all lying to turn my own son against me!" She was completely unraveling. Her carefully constructed facade was crumbling before our very eyes. But David didn't back down. He stood up and faced her. "No, Carol," he said, his voice gaining strength. "No more lies. We should have dealt with this 30 years ago. I thought I was protecting this family by keeping it a secret, but I was just enabling you. I let you become this bitter, controlling person. And I let you hurt Anna. And I won't do it anymore." He turned to Mark. "It's true, son. She accused me. For almost a year. It was the darkest time of my life, and she just did the same thing to your wife. She projected her own play she had lost. The aftermath was quiet and devastating. Carol, defeated and exposed, simply turned and walked out of the room. We could hear her go up the stairs and slam her bedroom door. The sound echoed the finality of the moment. An era had ended. The reign of Queen Carol was over. Mark sat on the couch, looking stunned, as if the entire foundation of his world had been ripped out from under him. Lisa was crying softly in her chair. David just stood by the window, looking out at the darkening sky, a single tear tracing a path down his weathered cheek. I stood up. My work here was done. "I'm going to go," I said quietly. Mark looked up at me, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading look. "Anna, wait," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I never would have, if I had known." "I know," I said, and for the first time I felt a pang of sympathy for him. He was a victim in this too, in a way. He had been manipulated and controlled by his mother his entire life. But my sympathy didn't erase his actions. It didn't erase his weakness. "I need time, Mark," I told him. "A lot of time. To think. To figure out what happens next." "I'll do anything," he said, standing up and taking a step towards me. "I'll go to therapy. We'll go to therapy. I'll cut her out of my life completely if that's what you want. Please, just don't leave me." "The ultimatum I gave you is off the table," I said. "A public apology from her is meaningless now. We're past that. This is much bigger. This is about you, Mark. It's about you deciding what kind of man you want to be, what kind of husband, what kind of father. And you can't do that overnight." I turned to leave. David walked over to me and put a hand on my arm. "Anna," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I am so sorry for my part in all this. For not being strong enough to stop her years ago. You are a good woman, and you are going to be a wonderful mother." "Thank you, David," I said, and I meant it. In the end, he had done the right thing. I walked out of that house and drove back to Sarah's, the weight of the past 3 years finally lifted from my shoulders. Anyone, drowning in her own bitterness and shame. David had moved into the guest room. Their marriage, for all intents and purposes, was over. I focused on myself and my pregnancy. With my mom and Sarah's help, I found a small apartment and started building a new life for myself and my baby. It was scary, but it was also empowering. For the first time, I was completely in control of my own happiness. About a month before my due date, Mark asked if he could see me. I agreed to meet him for coffee. He looked better than I had seen him in years. The anxiety was gone from his eyes. He seemed calmer, more centered. He apologized again, properly this time. He didn't make excuses. He took full responsibility for his weakness, for his failure to protect me. He told me he loved me, and that he would spend the rest of his life earning back my trust, if I would let him. He didn't ask me to come back. He just asked for a chance to be a father to our child, and maybe, someday, a husband to me again. I didn't give him an answer right away, but I saw a glimmer of hope, a glimmer of the man I had first fallen in love with. A few weeks later, I went into labor. I called my mom, and then, after a moment's hesitation, I called Mark. He was at the hospital in 20 minutes. He held my hand through the whole thing. He was my rock, and when our beautiful baby girl was born, he cried. He looked at her with so much love, and then he looked at me, and he whispered, "Thank you. She's perfect. You're perfect." We named her Hope. It's been 6 months now. Mark and I are taking things slow. We're in couples therapy. He's a wonderful father, completely devoted to Hope. He's still working on himself, but the changes are real. He's building a backbone, piece by piece. Carol is still a ghost in their family. She refuses therapy, refuses to apologize. She has completely isolated herself from everyone. David filed for divorce. He sold the house and bought a small condo by the lake. He sees Hope every weekend. He's a doting grandfather, and I can see the happiness returning to his eyes. Sometimes I think about that horrible day at the baby shower. I think about the question Carol asked, the question that was designed to destroy me. Is this